Back now on the race, time for the face-off tonight ahead of Obama's trip to the Middle East and Europe. We are debating Obama's foreign policy credentials. Today, Washington Post columnist Charles Krauthammer skewered Obama for his reported desire to speak in front of Germany's Brandenburg Gate, accusing Obama of the audacity of vanity, to the quote board. Barack Obama wants to speak at the Brandenburg Gate. He figures it would be a nice backdrop and picturesque way to bolster his foreign policy credentials. What Obama does not seem to understand is that the Brandenburg Gate is something that you earn. What exactly has he done in his lifetime to merit appropriating the Brandenburg Gate as a campaign prop? Obama is a three-year senator without a single important legislative achievement to his name. His most memorable work is a biography of his favorite subject, himself. Obama claims that when it comes to foreign policy, it's not about experience or resumes, it's about judgment. Case in point, Iraq. But picking sides in another president's war is a different challenge than being commander-in-chief of the military or trying to make progress in Hatfield and McCoy conflicts that have been raging for generations. So our face-off tonight, does Obama have the foreign policy credentials to support the case that he is the best alternative to the Bush years? Facing off tonight on the left, Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show on Air America, and an MSNBC political analyst. And on the right, Noah Oppenheim, co-author of the intellectual devotional series and former senior producer of the Today program here on NBC. Noah, your opening argument, your case here.
My case is this, is that Barack Obama is the first African-American nominee for president from a major party. He is an extraordinary human being, an extraordinary historic figure. There is no doubt about that. He's also an extraordinary politician. There is nobody better in recent memory in terms of giving speeches, rallying crowds, inspiring public support, inspiring feelings of hope, et cetera, et cetera. But your last guest, Mr. Daily Kos himself, said it best. Barack Obama is running a campaign based on themes, not specific policies. He's become like this Rorschach test where people project their greatest aspirations onto him. But so when it comes to the actual world of concrete foreign policy, the most rough and tumble arena imaginable, I'm not sure what he can point to suggest that besides being this sort of inspiring figure, that would convince me that he is going to be able to navigate this incredibly chaotic world that we live in.
I would say, Noah, in response, that inspiring figure is exactly what he's bringing with him abroad. I think that the reason that he ought to go to Brandenburg Gate, even though it looks like he might not now, is because he's got at least a 50-50 chance of being the face of America to the world after George W. Bush. And the rest of the world, just like many Americans, are looking for America to be restored to the standing in the world that this country had before the presidency of George W. Bush. Neoconservatives look back on the Brandenburg Gate and us winning the Cold War, and they like to say it's because Ronald Reagan spent the Russians into the ground, that he bankrupted them with our massive military buildup. I think a lot of the rest of us in this country look back at the Brandenburg Gate and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we say, you know what? The Soviet Union had a pretty stupid economic system. And that was a pretty fragile country. Yeah, and they were minting dissidents faster than they could jail them. And so they collapsed because Americans were a beacon of hope to the world, and because American values are more attractive to people when given the option. And so what Barack Obama represents is an America that once again represents respect for the rule of law, that represents a non-bullying approach to the rest of the world, and that represents the abandonment of the authoritarianism that was rejected by the world when we won the Cold War. And so I think he does offer a lot of hope, and I think that he's the post-Bush face of America, and he ought to speak at it. He ought to speak there. He ought to do it, and I think it'd be good for us.
But Rachel, I don't want to re-argue who won the Cold War or how it was won. But the bottom line is yeah, you're right that we need to do a better job of selling American values overseas. There's no doubt about that. But Oprah Winfrey and Tony Robbins are also inspirational figures, and no one would argue that they have the credentials to run American foreign policy. The point is that foreign policy is more than just inspiration and values. It's concrete, practical decisions. You know, Barack Obama likes to talk a lot about its judgment. It's all about judgment. Well, Barack Obama is talking about bombing the tribal regions of Pakistan no matter what President Musharraf says. Many people would argue that doesn't demonstrate a lot of good judgment. In fact, Senator Chris Dodd, one of the people who's being mentioned as a possible VP choice for Barack Obama, said back when he was running against him in the primary that it represented a dangerous and irresponsible attitude to suggest that we would bomb a country, a nuclear power, just because we want to go after bin Laden, despite what the leadership of that country might want. So when you get into these concrete issues, you know, the inspiration is great, but you got to get into these concrete points and look at what Barack Obama has actually said and done with regard to specific policies.
No, when it gets down to concrete issues and when it gets down to making a judgment call, I think if people are looking at Bush and McCain and deciding to go after Osama bin Laden by invading and occupying for 5 years a country that had nothing to do with 9/11, or actually going after Osama bin Laden where he is, probably in Pakistan, I think people would go with the latter judgment. So those details
you're
on the
advocating an
specifics,
invasion of Pakistan? Or are you suggesting
he hasn't said he would invade Pakistan. He said he would go after Osama bin Laden where he is, instead of outsourcing the fight against al-Qaeda to General Musharraf, who happily took our billions of dollars worth of military aid and then gave al-Qaeda and the Taliban safe haven in the tribal region. So go after bin Laden or fight Iraq. I'd pick
Let me bring in the rest of the panel on this because. Go ahead.
It's not an either-or I was just going to say it's not an either-or proposition. I don't think you have to. It's not that clear-cut of a choice, and it's not fair to loop to connect John McCain to George Bush that tightly, as although the Democrats would like to do that. John McCain was one of the first people who said that the war in Iraq was not being prosecuted effectively and responsibly. He was one of the first people to say, "Hey guys, we're a little bit off course here," and his support of the surge has paid off in terms of concrete results. John McCain does not want to give up on bin Laden.
John McCain's first statements on Iraq, I think about him talking about us being greeted as liberators. I think about John McCain saying what an easy fight it would be for us. And I think about the responsibility that you have when you're an American leader, talking about putting American troops in harm's way, and he actually said it would be a relatively easy fight. I think about that kind of judgment coming from somebody who served in the military, and I'm astonished that he's seen as having foreign policy credentials.
Let me broaden this out and ask a couple of political questions. John Harwood, to you first. The issue here of whether this is a referendum on the Bush years, the Bush foreign policy, and whether McCain gets swept up in that, or whether it is, in our focus in this debate tonight, a narrower focus on Barack Obama's credentials, and does he have what it takes? We know what Obama wants. He wants voters to just think about the Bush record and can consider change. And to Rachel's point, there is a different face to an Obama foreign policy. He's a Democrat. It would be a different course.
The election is dominantly a referendum on the Bush years. That's John McCain's problem. That's Barack Obama's opportunity. And I got to say, Rachel's got the high side of that argument. If you get to the question of whether we should have gone to war against Iraq, there are a lot of people in this country who argue that that is a colossal strategic blunder. That's pretty concrete. Barack Obama was on one side, John McCain was on the other. Now, George Bush and John McCain hope that history vindicates their judgment. Maybe they'll be right. But right now, that is a fair debate, and Barack Obama has got the advantage on that question.
Susan, your comment.
But being forward-looking, you could argue that bombing Pakistan would be an equally horrific strategic blunder. So instead of refighting the Iraq debate,
I think most Americans are going to be quite in agreement with Barack Obama when he says, if we have information that tells us where Osama bin Laden is, I'll go bomb wherever it takes to get him. I don't think the American people are going to have much of a quarrel with that.
And Noah, what do you call it when
right.
we send
That's
Hellfire missiles into Pakistan right now? When we're sending Hellfire missiles into Pakistan right now, shooting al-Qaeda guys, is that not bombing Pakistan?
It's sending Hellfire missiles into tribal regions with the permission of the Pakistani military and intelligence services. Barack Obama's point is he's going to do it no matter what.
Let me get Susan's comment. Get in on this, Susan.
Well, what I think this is going to be a bigger issue, obviously, and which is why Barack Obama wants to travel to Europe also. And I think, you know, Charles Krauthammer also went to the point to say, and here is a man who was voted 130 times president in the Illinois State Senate because he didn't really want to take major positions so maybe he would never be called authoritarian by some of our allies around the world because he'll never take a position. We're going to see next week just how many firm details he fills in. That's right. He is great on the themes and the inspiration and the nice photo ops, but that's not governing in foreign policy, and he better start dishing it out.
I got to take a break here. Here's my prediction. We're not going to get any details. I think he just wants the picture. He wants to set the tone when he's there next week. We'll take a break here.